Hello, I'm Kads, and welcome to today's video. So we're continuing on with the string of challenge tournaments, this one being epics only in Ice Golem. And for once, they are offering up a Void Shard. It's been a while since that's been the top reward, but let's hop into the tournament here. But you can see at 27.50, you can get yourself or earn yourself a Void Shard, and you can see that we are well on our way. Now, this is an instance where I highly recommend that you at least take a look at your group. It's Ice Golem, it's epics only. A lot of people, when you combine those two things, are not going to want to participate at all. So you could potentially pick up an easy win, take first place, get yourself or one of the top two maybe, and get some relentless gear. Or you can go like I'm doing, go all in and just get yourself the Void Shard and kind of see where that puts you in the rankings. But just keep that in mind. People, generally speaking, don't like Ice Golem, and adding any additional restrictions on top of it will make it a lot less incentivizing for active participation. So just make sure to check your group. Now, hopping over to the dungeon itself, let's talk about the best stages to farm. As I usually say for these challenge tournaments, I do highly recommend that you do this on normal mode, just because the restrictions can make it very painful and difficult to get through. Epics only on Ice Golem hard, especially all the way out to 10, would be pretty difficult, just because you're not going to have access to the standard champions that you've seen in most of the meta comps. There's no Artak, for example. So normal mode is definitely the place you want to go when you're kind of restricted to epics only or any kind of other restrictions in general. So the best stage to farm, if you want the bestest possible gear, would be stage 25, and I do have a team to showcase for that. One step down would be the most efficient stage from a points perspective. The most points per energy spent is going to be on stage 20. I have a team for that one as well. And then if you're kind of more progressing early mid game, or you just want a really easy experience, then stage 16 can work. It's Void Affinity, you still get 6-star gear, and it's just a lot easier to do. So let's start off with the stage 20 team, and I will be the first to admit that this is a highly aggressive team. You can go a lot more conservatively if you so choose. You can opt for like a Eurogram plus some food champions to kind of solo it or whatever, or duo, however you want to come at it. But just highlighting that this is more of an aggressive strategy. We're bringing in heavy hitters. Dark Elhaine, if we get frozen, she can get free AoEs against the boss. We have Fanax in the mix because he just hits hard, but also he can block revive, notably on the A1, which can get rid of the minions and take them out of the fight forever. To empower both of those, we have Stagnite as our debuffer, AoE decrease defense, AoE decrease attack, which helps keep us alive. We have Gorgorab here, who's going to be our increased attack champion, who just powers up our nukers to make sure that they can do maximum damage. And then Vogoth is in there kind of as the meat shield, protecting the team from damage. So let's go ahead and see this team in action. If I remember correctly from my testing prior, it was around 2 minutes or so, give or take. But yeah, when you have this level of gear, and I will say that, I am an endgame player, so this is, endgame builds, even despite it being epics only. But when you are endgame, it's very easy to kind of blast through waves. And so this might not reflect your individual experience, depending on the gear quality that you might have, or the champions that you might have at your disposal, empowerment and awakening and all that stuff. But as you can see there, pretty much 30-ish seconds to get through the waves, just brute force. We don't really have to worry about the reflect damage. It can happen, obviously, but Vogoth has a AoE provoke in his kit, and so sometimes, or a lot of the time, he ends up taking care of wave 2. So unfortunate there, we got a little bit of bad RNG, but when the second attack comes in, there you go, Fanax should be able to block revive. All he has to do, or all you have to do, is have one debuff on one of the minions, and you just lock Fanax into only using his A1 in this section of the fight, and then eventually, in most cases, he will eventually kill some of the minions. One thing, we get to see Dark Elhaine's passive there. So yeah, the first one was her passive proc, and second one was her taking her turn. And there we go, we got lucky. So now both of the minions are dead forever. And effectively at this point, we're just going to take a couple of AoE hits whenever he gets this thing off. But we don't have to worry ever about the minions coming back. And again, this is just showing just the sheer power of the epics on my account. This may or may not reflect what you're able to do. But yeah, we're just going to keep triggering, and yeah, just keep doing that. But if you placed more freezes, Dark Elhaine, we get more stuff. But essentially, whenever Fanax or Dark Elhaine take a turn, they're going to trigger the passive. So that's just the capabilities against this mode. But yeah, sub 2 minutes, super fun team, relatively quick. And again, this is more hyper aggressive. And I'll show you guys the builds later on. Switching over to stage 25, we have a bit of a more reasonable team, a more like traditional, I would say, Ice Golem team. But the things to highlight here is that we have Venomage in there as like our primary AoE poisoner. We have Dark Kale in the mix, who can extend the poisons, but also provide decrease attack, importantly, for when we get to the boss. Rected Wrath, generic support healer, reviver champion who can keep the team running, keep them alive. Ugo is our selected debuffer, one because she can heal as well and cleanse with heal reduction, which is notably annoying when you get to the boss phase from the minions, but also she places block buffs, which is just handy against the Seekers in wave 2. And then last but not least, believe it or not, we have our wave DPS, which is going to be a Kemptum. We're going to be abusing his passive here, where whenever a poison ticks from one enemy, it will apply the same damage to anyone else under Hex. So you're going to see that in action, and it's going to be able to melt through the wave. So let's go ahead and see that. Yeah, Kemptum, I don't know if he's underrated, but I do think most people kind of know his power level and what he can do. But essentially the way his passive works is that whenever that passive procs on enemies, it also counts as like an attack from him. And so it synergizes with Giant Slayer. You get a lot of Giant Slayer hits whenever whenever poisons proc, and then you just get a lot of the poison damage there. So you can see there, we're just starting to chunk their health. Whenever they start taking their turns, they're going to take a lot of damage. And then of course we have the poison activation from the A1s of Venomage as well as Dark Kale. And so within a minute or so, we should be able to power through the wave. So this is just one way to deal with the waves if you have an Kemptum and a couple of poisoners on your team. But of course, if you want to go the Seer route, you can definitely put, your standard debuffer combined with her, give some buffs and just blow up the waves that way. She is an epic, of course, so that is one way. But then you're just gonna have to come up with some solution when you get around to the boss phase. So here we have Ugo doing her thing. We can place block buffs. Obviously, if she happens to crit, then she still puts out the buffs because it preempts it's as soon as you hit them before the debuffs are applied. But in most cases, she'll actually put the block buffs up without critting, and then we don't have to worry about the heal and or the increased defense. And then notably, Venomage does have heal reduction in her on her A3, so she can also prevent the heal that way. And what's funny about this wave is that the Seekers actually help us. So we actually don't want to have CC on the squad because we want them to take as many turns as possible so that they can take the poison ticks damage from themselves and then spread that damage across thanks to a Kemptum's passive. So having the Seekers take 2 turns is actually helping us because he's activating poisons on themselves, which is activating them across all the champions or all the enemy combatants. So just about 2 minutes or so on average is how long it takes to get through the waves, depending on the RNG of the poison activation from the A1s of Dark Kale and Venomage. So one thing to mention here in terms of the AI overrides, I'm being a little bit more conservative here, but also being a little bit aggressive. And what I mean by that is that Ugo has open or don't use on the decreased defense. We only want to use it once because the Ice Golem is so slow that it doesn't really need to be placed once again. But obviously, decreased defense will increase the amount of damage that you're going to do from Giant Slayer procs. And yeah, there you go. Good to mention that Kemptum's passive does work against the boss. So you can trigger the Retribution hit because you are effectively applying attacks and or Giant Slayer procs whenever you take the poisons on the boss. And it could happen, as you saw, with both minions alive. But no worries. We have decreased attack on. We have 2 supports. We have 2 healers. And that is a-okay. They can die, but it's fine. They'll be brought back up. So there is some risk, again, with this more aggressive form, and that being the fact that we're running a decreased defense champion, which is not necessarily mandatory for the waves, but of course, because we're using Giant Slayer alongside a Kemptum's passive, it does help speed up the waves a tiny bit. So yeah, use the Kemptum with caution is what I'm going to say. Make sure that your champions are relatively tanky enough to survive. In this case, Rectored Wrath, she is Force Affinity. This is a Magic Affinity stage, so the boss can never crit her, but that does not mean that he can't get, take his turn after his passive procs and get a kind of a double hit, and that can be very detrimental to the run. So again, just be a little cautious if you're going to run the Kemptum strategy. It could be a lot safer to run some sort of Seer composition, but I just happen to not be a Seer user. So here we are, coming to the end of the fight. We did get a little bit of bad RNG and got another Retribution proc, so Dark Kale is once again on the floor. But one more poison tick or one more turn for the boss. There we go. So yeah, this is kind of depending on the RNG of like reviving the minions and the procs and the Giant Slayer and the Kemptum passive and whatnot. This team varies anywhere between 3 minutes and 4 minutes. That's just kind of the nature of Ice Golem. As we kind of saw with the stage 20 team, like the faster you go, the more you're going to take the Retribution hits. So you kind of have to balance that. And so there's no really quick, reliable way to do Ice Golem. That's just the nature of the mechanics of the boss. But I will point out that if you do manage to deal damage via poisons, then you will not actually trigger the Retribution hits from the boss. So that can be helpful. In this case, the Kemptum kind of gets around that just because of his passive. But if you just wanted to run a bunch of poisoners and kind of just tank and wait for the minions to die, wait for the Ice Golem to take his turns, then you can run just all-out poison strategy, and that can work as well. So now, as promised, let's take a look at the builds and all the epics featured on these teams, starting off with the stage 20 speed team, and we'll begin with Dark L Hain. As you can see here, she is in some lethal gear, but it is not maxed out. She's not one of my primarily used champions, but she does, she is built for damage, but she is really slow, 172. So typically, if I ever use her outside of like Ice Golem niche cases like this, it's usually into a Gurgle or a Torment in the arena, just kind of a meme, but she is the anti-freeze champion. But total stats here: 45,000 on the HP, 6,300 on the attack, 172 on the speed, attack percentage on the boots notably there. And note that the boots and the gloves aren't maxed, so there's a little bit of attack and crit damage that's missing from the build. 204% crit damage, and we don't care about the accuracy or the resistance. For the Blessing, Crushing Rend, of course, just more damage. And if she happened to be 6-star, that would probably be the most optimal level. But again, she's not a primary champion, so I'm not really concerned with that. And then for the Masteries offense tree here, of course, where she is built like a nuker. So we're just coming down, making the kind of circle here, all the way down to Helm Smasher to ignore as much defense as possible on top of the lethal set. And then we're comparing that a little bit with the defense tree, kind of making that standard Z pattern for defensive, counterattacking nukers. But I just opted to not really finish her Masteries. Like I said, she's not a core champion anymore. Maybe like way back in the day, 3 years ago, I used to use her nice Golem before like hard mode and before stage 20 or 25 even existed. But since then, she's kind of fallen by the wayside. Stag Knight, champion number 2, is in Immortal and Shield. So he just kind of protects that team from their initial onslaught of damage. And his total stats are as follows: 69,000 on the HP, 3,300 on the defense, 264 on the speed, and then 481 on the accuracy. This is definitely overkill. When we're talking about normal mode, you only need around 250 accuracy for stage 20 and beyond. So you're basically good to go with somewhere between 230 and 250 on the accuracy. So this is definitely overkill for that fight. For the Blessing, I opted for Cruelty. I do like to run this on my debuffing champion just because they already placed AoE decreased defense, and so this helps them lower the defense of enemies even more. And then for the Masteries standard debuffer stuff, you guys have probably seen this before. Offense tree hugging the entirety of the left-hand side, coming down to War Master. Support tree hugging the entirety of the right-hand side, coming down to Sniper and Master Hexer. Next up, we have my Vogoth in my Soul Bolster set on my account with Immortal and some protection for the extra stats. Total stats here are as follows: 103,000 on the HP. Like I said, he's built like a meat shield, 2,700 on the defense, 174 on the speed. Very slow. HP percentage across the bottom row, and so he just doesn't really care about his speed. His job is to soak up damage on behalf of the team. And then a little bit of resistance, or a decent amount of resistance, I should say, 467, and a little bit of accuracy, 232, which is again kind of in that ballpark of where you would need it to be for stage 20 to 25. For the Blessing, I opted for Commanding Presence, so it just improves her aura a little bit. In that particular instance, I think Gorgrab was the lead, which is an arena aura, so it doesn't really matter. But yeah, that's just kind of a generic Blessing to use. And then for the Masteries here, he's kind of a unique build where, like I said, he's just a tank. He's a meat shield for the team, so we're primarily going into the defense tree, picking up a lot of the tankiness stuff. Definitely want Selfless Defender so he can take damage on behalf of other people, works with his passive. And then Bulwark is kind of like half of the Guardian set at all times, and so he's just taking 5% of the damage that everyone else receives. And then Support Tree, as much of the healing stuff as possible, and then coming down the right-hand side just to get to Lore Steel for the extra stats, more HP in this case, for all the gear he has on. Next up, we have Gorgrab, who apparently is missing gear, and that is news to me. I should probably fix that. But yeah, he is meant to be in Speed, Perception, and Immortal. Hey, look at that. He survived without a helmet. But that's funny. Yeah, total stats here. I guess he 57,000 plus 4,000 or whatever HP you get for a helmet, so somewhere around 60,000. 3,100 on the defense, 238 on the speed, and then a little bit of resistance, 350, and then 250 on the accuracy. This is kind of where you want it to be if you want to have enough resistance to resist stuff in normal mode up through stage 25, 350, and then 250 once again is the accuracy requirement for these levels of stages. For the Blessing, I think I just picked Phantom Touch because I don't really use him that much. He's like a Cursed City Faction Wars type champion, so I just get a little more damage whenever he happens to attack is what I was optimizing there. But yeah, I don't think it's that important. But maybe if you're in the early game using him in the arena, then Commanding Presence would make a little bit more sense if he's your aura lead. And as you suspect, because he is a Faction Wars-esque champion, don't care about his masteries at all whatsoever. And then rounding out the first team here, we have my supercharged Fennex here, +4 empowered and whatnot, 5-star awakened. So very fortunate to have all of that. It's not mandatory, but of course it helps him hit harder and makes it a lot easier for him to kill the minions. He's in a lethal set here. And then total stats are as follows: 43,000 on the HP, 6,300 on the attack, 264 on the speed, full crit rate, and almost 300% on the crit damage. And notably, he has enough accuracy to land the stuff as we needed for these waves, despite being in an attack banner, believe it or not. For the Blessing, Crushing Rend, once again, just like, nukers, epic nukers in particular, can benefit highly from Crushing Rend. Ideally, it'd be 6-star, but he just happens to be at 5. And then for the Masteries, basically the same as Dark Elhain, coming down the offense tree, making the circle here, and then coming down to Helm Smasher to ignore as much defense as possible. But I opted for the support tree just for the extra accuracy, but there is an argument that could be made for the defense tree because Retribution on the counterattack on his A1 block revive can be very, very deadly in the right situation, so just keep that in mind. Switching over to the stage 25 team, we have my Dark Kale and his, I guess, old school or his old dragon build. I haven't really changed it despite him not being in my team anymore. And if you want to check out the new team that I have built for Dragon, I can link that up above in the card. However, there is going to be a change to that team as well, an upgrade, shall we say, for Prince Chimera coming to the mix. So spoiler alert on that one, but I digress. So he's in Relentless and Retaliation. Retaliation being that whenever he, whenever he gets hit, 50% chance he can counterattack and potentially activate some poisons that he has placed out there himself or that someone else on the team has placed out there. Total stats, 53,000 on the HP, 2,500 on the defense, 242 on the speed, full crit rate, which you do need to extend debuffs on his A2, and then enough accuracy to do the job, 352, which is more tuned around hard mode dungeons, again, for hard mode dragon formally, but I just haven't seen a reason to take the gear off. No one else really needs it. Cruelty is the blessing I chose for him because he does have a triple hitter on the A1, so once you get to the boss stages, it stacks up very, very quickly. The cruelty stacks, and it's just really effective to max that out. And then for the masteries, they are complete because, like I said, he used to be a core champion. We're making the standard Crescent Moon on the offense tree, coming all the way down to Giant Slayer because, of course, as we highlighted, he has a triple hitter on the A1, and then fairly standard debuff for masteries on the support tree, except that I opted for Life Drinker just because he's fairly squishy. He's attack based, but I'm using him as more of a support, but coming down to Sniper and Master Hexer for that. Next up, we have my Venomage, who her build is optimized around Amius, so that is why the accuracy is so high as we're going to see here, and to facilitate high accuracy, she is in double perception and a couple of broken pieces. So total stats, 58,000 on the HP, 4,100 on the defense. That is on purpose because Form 2 of Amius, he's going to target typically her whenever she's on the team, and having higher defense plus the Awakening means that he's not ignoring all of your defense, so having more defense will 1, draw his aggro, and 2, allow you to potentially survive. 253 on the speed, so just ahead of Amius in terms of speed, and then almost 500 on the accuracy, which again is what you would need for hard mode of Amius. That's where she is tuned for. For the blessing, generically just put Phantom Touch on her once again, just kind of like Gorgorab. It just helps her deal more damage, even though she's not really a DPS. Don't really need much else from the other blessings. And then for the masteries, pretty standard debuffer stuff, although they're incomplete just because I didn't really find it necessary. And in fact, having the 4-turn poison, or having the 4-turn heal reduction, because it's a 3-turn cooldown, a 3-turn duration on her A3, is actually bad for Amius, and so you actually do want it to be on a 3-turn cooldown just so that it falls off at the right time when he changes back to Form 1, and so he doesn't heal himself. So that's kind of a choice to ignore Master Hexer in this case. But if you're using her anywhere else, Master Hexer is good just because you can extend the duration of the heal reduction and or the poisons. And of course, for the offense tree, left hand side, of course, we're hugging that, coming all the way down to War Master for the extra damage. Next up, we have our star wave kill DPS champion in Kemptum, who's in a lifesteal set, one of the few champions, if not only champions, on my account currently in a lifesteal set. 50,000 on the HP, 3,700 on the attack, 2,200 on the defense, 247 on the speed, full crit rate. He is in crit rate gloves. That is why his crit damage is relatively low at 135, and then 346 on the accuracy. I do flex him as needed into like hard mode dungeons and stuff like that, so in Curse City, so he does have a higher amount of accuracy tuned for that. But again, 250 would be apt for normal mode dungeons. Cruelty, same logic as Dark Hill, triple hitter here, AoE, so you just stack up the cruelty stacks very, very quickly. And then for the masteries here, pretty much the same as Dark Hill, Crescent Moon coming down to Giant Slayer for both of the triple hitters, and then standard debuff for masteries. You could opt to finish with Sniper and Master Hexer, but because he's not a core champion anymore, I opted to not finish that. So up to your discretion on that one if you do choose to use him. Next up, we have our 2 primary supports, Rector Drath in a reflex and a speed set. Total stats are as follows: 68,000 on the HP, 3,500 on the defense, 302 on the speed. Very fast, but you'll note that she is 6-star awakened, +2 empowered, blah, blah, blah. So a lot of extra stats going into the build. High resistance, 567. So this is kind of like an arena flex champion for me, but primarily she's just meant to have enough accuracy or resistance so that no one in PvE can debuff her. That is the goal, at least whenever I use her. For the blessing, this is a Hydra optimized blessing here for Miracle Heal so that she can counter the Head of Decay. And then for the mastery, it's kind of indexing a little bit more into the resistance and healing stuff, similar to Vogoth, but a little bit different. Defense tree, some of the tankiness stuff. Solidarity helps increase her resistance on top of her passive, giving you 50 resistance when you're under a veil. And then Unshakable for more resistance. A lot of the healing stuff on the left-hand side of the support tree, definitely banking over for Lower Steel for the extra speed because we're using a speed set. And then banking back to Lasting Gifts through Spirit Haste for the extra speed when people are dead, because she is a reviver after all. And of course, Lasting Gifts extends the duration of a lot of the buffs that she does, contagious heals and the veils, etc. And then lastly, we have Ugo, my Hydra build for her, recently rebuilt into Affinity Breaker and 4-piece of Merciless, so that she can counteract or just place her debuffs through weak hits. That's the intention of the Affinity Breaker set, while getting the bonus of the mini reflex effect of the Merciless set. So total stats are as follows: 84,000 on the HP, 3,600 on the defense, 268 on the speed, and then 528 on the accuracy, which again, overkill for the purpose of these dungeons. But at one time I was building her to have high accuracy for the event dungeon, I think Odin specifically, if memory serves, and so I just haven't felt the need to lower her accuracy from that level. So she's just really high accuracy compared to what's needed in the content she's actually in. Same logic as Rector Drath for the Hydra build, countering the Head of Decay with the Miracle Heal blessing. And then for the masteries, pretty darn standard debuffer masteries. Left hand side offense tree down to War Master, right hand side support tree going down to Sniper and Master Hexer. So in case you don't have these exact champions, or you don't want to run these exact combinations, there are a handful of other honorable mentions that could be used for this particular fight, depending on the team that you put around them. In terms of like poison HP burn champions, like I highlighted Kemptum and Venomage, but you'll note that we're not running Uragrim. He's definitely awesome. He's kind of like the mini Bad L, the epic version, so to speak. So he can play some AoE poisons and as well as sustain himself. So if you want to run him as like, again, kind of the solo champion in a regen set, he can definitely finish off the boss once you get there. My Celiac Priest Ornn can place AoE poisons and poison sensitivity, so he can kind of do once again a similar job. He also heals himself a good bit. Mordecai, Frenzy the Cackler, if you wanted to go for more HP burn activation type strategies here. And so there's a handful of epics that can do a lot of the poisony type stuff. In terms of debuffers, I highlighted Stag Knight. He only obviously is negative affinity for stage 25, but he is positive or neutral affinity for stage 20. So if you wanted to use someone else, you could use Duck the Pierced. Same AoE decrease defense and decrease attack, but he would be better affinity for stage 25. Deacon can work for stage 20, same affinity as Stag Knight. Mr. Rider Dahi, super fun if you want to run him. You know, lots of damage, kind of a damagey debuffer. Same thing with like Zargala and that kind of line of work. So just, you know, a lot of decrease defense options for you to run depending on the affinity of the stage you're running. In terms of these supports, I definitely highlighted Ugo and Rector Drath, but you could also run like Gotzi Guarneri. You can run Rearguard Sergeant if you want to go the more ally protection route. Same logic with Miscreated Monster for ally protection. Vogoth we highlighted as well. White Dryad Nia, mini version of ally protection, but also a lot of healing with their passive. So there's a good amount of supports that you could use. And then nukers are a dime a dozen. So pick whoever you'd like to use on your squad. All right, so that's going to do it for my strategy relative to the Epics Only Ice Golem tournament. This is a repeat of the one they did back in, I think, June of last year. And my teams are somewhat similar, but a little bit different. And obviously, I think my Epics are a little bit more empowered in the nearly year it's been since we last had these. But I just want to come back to the tournament and once again reiterate that check your groups, see if it's an easy win potentially, because again, Ice Golem, very, very unpopular dungeon over in the grand scheme of things, and having a restriction on top of that can make it even more unpopular. A lot of people are holding back resources because there's a fusion starting in a couple of days on Monday, and but obviously this will end before that. So this is a great time if you have the bandwidth to spend your energy running some Ice Golem, put together a relatively easy team. You can speed run stage 20, or you can try to build a more robust team for stage 25 as I have done, and then just get the dub, get your Void Shard, and get out and get on with the fusion. As always, if you did find this video helpful, then be sure to hit that like button down below. It really does help out the channel. And if you're enjoying the content overall on this channel and you'd like to see more content just like it in the future, then feel free to hit that subscribe button down below as well. Thanks for watching and have a good one.